Dr. No was the first of the broccoli saltspin James Bond films. The film was adapted from the book by the same name by Ian Fleming, and the character of James Bond had already been firmly established in the literary and popular culture, so the film's producers wasted no time in adapting one of the latest books in the series. But undoubtedly, it was this film that really cemented James Bond as a popular icon in culture, and that is in no small part due to the casting of Sean Connery, who established himself so firmly in the role that producers would struggle to replace him later on in the series. And overnight, Sean Connery went from relative obscurity into a household name. And although James Bond had been popular, it was the films that really launched the brand into the stratosphere. By the time Goldfinger was released, Bond mania was in full swing. But today, I'm going to take a look back at the Dr. No figures produced by Sideshow Collectibles. I believe these were actually the first two figures produced in the Sideshow Collectibles line of 1/6 James Bond figures. And we can see here, this is where they begin to establish that each character would utilise a different film poster for the front of the box, and the side panelling art would have a photo of each with either a blue or a red colour scheme, depending on whether they were hero or villain. I really love this packaging. I really think the whole branding and design of it is really solid, and I think it's very displayable. Each of the Bond boxes are gatefold covers, so you can open that front cover there and you can see the figure in all its glory through that window packaging, and then on the left hand side there's a little bit of information about the film and the full cast list, and there's some images there from the opening title sequence as well. Meanwhile, the reverse of the packaging gives us a little bit of bio about James Bond and the mission, but also it takes some snapshots from throughout the film and shows us the other figure available in this line. So here we have the Connery Bond in his tuxedo, the design of which is fairly straightforward and simple, but it is very nicely tailored, and there's some lovely little details in here as well which really make the figure pop, and I have to say I think the sculpt is excellent as well. You'll notice the cuffs are a different material to the main tuxedo. They are obviously a more shiny and a light catching kind of material which really sparkle in the light. And you can see this has been extended to the piping along the whole of the trouser leg as well, which is fantastic. Another neat little detail is the socks that they give them. I know this probably seems really mundane by today's standards, but at the time this was actually kind of different. And aside from the trim on the outer lapels there, is also nice little detailing in the bow tie, which is a plastic piece, but also the buttons there on his shirt, really nicely done. And then finally we have the make or break element in my opinion, which is the head sculpt. And for my money, I think this is actually pretty solid. Now, it's not perfect and it definitely could have been refined, but I think this is instantly recognisable as Sean Connery, and I think they've done a really good job. And I think most impressively, they've managed to capture something of his charm in this as well, without compromising the mould by making him too smiley or too unserious. Now, most Sideshow collectible figures from this time have the same articulation patterns, so I'll just run through it once here with the Sean Connery in case you've not owned one of these figures before. Now, his neck is on a ball joint, which means he can spin his head right the way around if you want him to, and he can also look up and down with great range of motion. He also has ball jointed shoulders, which means he can lift his arms up and out to the side there, which is great, and you can even swivel them so that he can get the most out of the elbow articulation, which is double jointed, meaning of course that his hand, if you really want to force it, can touch his head, which is fantastic. Now he also has articulation at the wrist, so at the top of the wrist there, just under the cuffs, there is a rotation, so he can spin his wrist right the way around. Now where it's actually literally at the wrist, he can also rotate there as well, and it is hinged, which means his hand can arch forwards and backwards as well. So there's a huge range of motion here, which is fantastic. In terms of the upper body, he does have a joint in the chest which allows him to lean from side to side and a little bit forwards and backwards, but not a great deal. He also has a waist swivel as well, which allows him to rotate from side to side. Meanwhile, his legs hinge at the hip, meaning he can kick his legs out and forwards and a little bit backwards as well, which is absolutely great. Now his knees are also double jointed, much like his elbows, which means you can actually get his legs to kick back quite far behind him. He does have a hinge at the ankle as well, meaning that the feet can arch upwards and down, but they also rotate from side to side, which is excellent. He also comes fully loaded with a whole host of extras as well, including a bottle of vodka, a cocktail mixer, a tumbler, his gun holster, his Walther PPK, a silencer, his Beretta, and another silencer. Here he is with his jacket off and the gun holster in place. It looks pretty good, it's pretty accurate to what you see in the film. He does indeed have that blue strap. And here is his Walther PPK. So as you can see, the detailing is quite minimal with the PPK really. There's not a lot of detailing going on there, much in the way of paint taps, because it is just moulded in that black plastic. But it does slide into his holster fairly neatly. It's not a great fit in truth. You do have to kind of force it in, which I'm not a big fan of, and I'm not convinced by the way it looks when it is finally in. It just looks a little bit like it's sticking out too much. And as you can see, it fits perfectly into his hand. His finger there does slide through onto the trigger, which looks fantastic. And I'm a big fan of the Sideshow hands because they have individual fingers, but they're firm enough to hold things solidly, but they're flexible enough to be able to manipulate them to be able to do things like this, which is fantastic. I'm really pleased that they found so many different accessories to give this James Bond, because he's fairly light on gadgets in the film, so it's quite nice that they've found these extra little bits and pieces, and I think there's enough here, enough variety of extras to recreate some of his signature looks throughout the film, and yeah, I think they're pretty fun. I think they've done a really nice job with these. So, moving on to the central villain of the film, we have Dr. No himself. Once again, we have the same gatefold cover there with the same information on the inside layer, and of course that window packaging there to display the figure. Meanwhile, the back of the box has flipped the art essentially, so there's a bit more information about Dr. No, some more snaps from the film, and of course we can see both figures in this series. Dr. No's costume is fairly simple and straightforward. It is essentially just that Nero suit, so there isn't a lot of detailing here for Sideshow Collectibles to really draw on and make something out of. However, it is very nicely presented. He does have his rubber shoes, which are quite nicely done. There's actually a little bit of grain running through them, and once again we can see he has some socks there as well, which is, like I said before, it was a little bit different at the time. It was quite a cool touch. The only other point of interest worth commenting on is his hands, because of course his hands are those metallic ones, and they've sculpted them really quite nicely here, and they've definitely recreated that look, so this is quite nice. This time the likeness I think is less strong, I think it's less striking. There's something that's, they've definitely caught something of the actor, and yet there's just little things that are a little bit off with it I think, so the proportions are just ever so slightly too wide I think in the face, but otherwise not a bad job. Sadly, he is much lighter on accessories. I was really hoping he'd come with his cigar, but what we do get is his radiation suit, so essentially it's a second outfit, and it comes with his boots, and of course that transparent soft plastic helmet. I do really like that they gave him this. It is, like I said, a second look, which is really kind of cool. The idea of it's really good. I think in practice it's a little bit frustrating because it's quite a difficult thing to get on him, and when it's on it doesn't look that convincing, to be honest. It doesn't quite fit the way it should, I don't think. But nevertheless, I think top marks for trying, and like I said, I do really like the idea of it. In conclusion then, this was a really encouraging first step for the line. A fantastic couple of releases here. I think in particular the Sean Connery really shines. It's a fantastic James Bond figure. Really love the outfit and the design of it, and the tailoring is really, really strong. Likewise, the Dr. No itself is an excellent figure. It is very, very nicely tailored, and it looks pretty fantastic. The likeness isn't quite 100% spot on, but it's still pretty damn strong, and I think overall these two figures represent some of the best figures in the line actually. So I think they came out the gate in really strong form, and this will continue with the line as well. There'll definitely be ups and downs going forwards, but this is a really, really strong start to the line. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.